Hey, what's going on, everybody? A special guest today is Zac Thomas, former Appalachian State quarterback, played for Coach Frank Ponce, and that's what we're going to get into. Zac, what's going on, man?
Hey man, how you doing?
Good. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Basically, just trying to get some more insight into Coach, and obviously, you were with him for 3 years there. And for people that don't know, your accolades are great. One of the top five quarterback, ranking in the top five at Appalachian State. 32-6 as a starter, former Sun Belt Player of the Year. So a lot of success for you, and that's why I thought it'd be great. I guess take me back to recruiting. You're from Trussville, Alabama. What do you remember about coaching and kind of your recruiting process into getting to App State?
Yeah, so my recruiting process was a little different. So actually, App wasn't in my top three when I was really deciding on schools to go to. And I unfortunately broke my leg my senior year of high school. And so a lot of offers got pulled and some things started changing here and there. And then I got a call from Coach Ponce, and we really connected on the phone. And he came and took an in-house visit. And loved I love Coach Ponce. Loved what he stood for. He's a family-oriented guy, and just the beliefs that he believed in was something that I felt like I could be with for the next couple of years of my life. And so took an official visit up to App and fell in love with App. And so I think most of my success comes from the determination that Coach Ponce put into us when we first started. So I owe a lot of gratitude to him, but definitely changed my life and made me a better football player from a standpoint of an athlete coming in. And that's what you want from, I'm a teenager coming to a place that I've never been before, and you want to be mentored, you want to be coached, you want to be led. And Coach Ponce did exactly that.
What are your maybe early impressions of him in that recruiting process, or maybe it's that in-home visit that he came, you touched on a little bit. Could you expand on it maybe a little bit more about what you remember about him? And essentially, like you said, that they essentially kind of vaulted themselves up for you in your process.
Yeah, so Coach Ponce, we actually call him Mr. 305. He is Miami's finest. He's very different. It's definitely a person that I had never met before. And he's very passionate about family, very passionate about football. And so I think just his passion relays to how he is as a person. And he's a very, on the football field, it's a different story. He's very business oriented when it comes to the football and doing your job the correct way. But outside of football, very family, can go to him with any situations in life. And so I think my first impressions of him was my mom actually made a chicken and rice casserole, and that was the first time that he had ever had that. And he still talks about it to this day. So he's definitely has meant a huge part in my life and my family's life. And so I think him just pouring into us as athletes and as football players and as men is definitely very beneficial. And Miami is definitely lucky to have him.
Yeah, as a Midwest guy, man, I know all about the casserole. So that's cool to hear. You touched on your injury there in high school. When did they when did Coach kind of get involved with you? And then essentially, I'm thinking, just outside looking in, that seems to be maybe a little bit difficult in terms of dealing with the injury, but they still believed in you, that kind of thing. What was that like? And essentially, what did it mean to you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it meant the world because at that point, I really didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if football was going to happen in college. A lot of teams, like I said, pulled the offers, so was kind of really at a fork in the road and didn't know which way to take it. And then the recruiting with App probably started in December, and then I took the official in January. So it was pretty bang bang, and I think we built a relationship on the fly. And we didn't have a lot of time to build that relationship before you can come in and be the player at the university. But I think the small relationship that we did build also impacted when we came into school. So it was definitely bang bang for me in my situation. But at that point, you just got to put a lot of trust in him and his knowledge of the game and, what he sees. And I owe a lot to him for seeing something in me that at that point in time that I didn't see. So he saw something in me that I didn't see at that point in time. And so I think that just shows the kind of character that he is and the pride that he has for the game of football.
You maybe the interactions during recruiting, because other people talking to you, and essentially you said you kind of had to almost essentially speed up the process in terms of getting to know each other. a little bit better. What do you remember about either the text messages or calls or just the interactions before you arrived?
Yeah, I mean, he was always checking in, making sure at that point doing what I needed to be doing to be ready when I came in the summer. So whether that was checking in on me, making sure that I was throwing the right amount of times a week, or staying on top of my grades, or the foolishness that high schoolers deal with to come to college. You have to be set up for success when you get there. So always just checking in, making sure that first and foremost, the football is good, but also checking in, making sure family is going well, the home life is going well. So he's definitely, from that standpoint, he's very heavy in family, and he always checks in on you before you check in on him. So I think that shows a lot about him and the kind of man that he is. And so I think it was just a lot of checking in. And obviously, you start getting the playbooks here and there. So reaching out to him with questions or anything of that nature. And then now, obviously, it's probably a little different because you have Zoom and whatnot. But then it was just a lot of studying on your own. And if you had questions, reaching out, seeing if he can get that answer to you. So it's a lot depending on you, but it's also a lot from a mentor standpoint of him leaning in on you and guiding you to be successful.
And certainly, I want to get into your breakout season, as you take over for Taylor there as a starter. But those first 2 years, not, redshirting, not playing much, that kind of those 2 years in the development process, what were those years like? And essentially, how did coach kind of guide you through those times when you weren't playing as much?
I'll say Coach Ponce demands a lot. And I say that in a good way. He expects very highly of you, and from a football standpoint, he wants you to be the best you can. And the reason that you're there is because you're on scholarship to perform for this university, for your family. You're here to get an education. So he's constantly preaching that. And I think just buying into who you are and also relaying the message of why you're here. And obviously, at the end of the day, you don't want to waste money. So really just being the best form of yourself that you can be. So I think he relied on teaching and mentoring a heavy bit, but I also think he did a very good job of leaning on to the older players that we had in the room and making sure that they had us under their wings to make sure that all of our questions got answered before we went to our coach. So I think he leaned on the older, like Taylor Lamb, and then we had Zeb Spear and Fitch. I think he leaned on them a lot to really guide us and to set us up for success. But in the meantime, he was always pouring into us, whether that was meetings or that we were interacting, whether that was off the field, on the field. And then from a practice standpoint, always expecting greatness. So if you made a mistake for it, you paid for it. And so I think that's just the kind of coach he was, and he demanded perfection. Obviously, we know perfection isn't a possibility, but that's what is in his eyes, and he wants you to be perfect. And sometimes it's not realistic, but at the end of the day, he sets the guidelines of what he wants, and you know what is in front of you to attain that.
And certainly, I imagine, things are different as your role changes in that there in 2018 there. But your practices, what were those kind of like those first, in particular, those first couple years there at school? And essentially, you touched on it there a little bit, but just to make sure you were ready to go once your role kind of changed there as you got that lead spot there. But what was the practices like in the development, and maybe some key things that he focused in on for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first year I was there, my freshman season, it was really just understanding football from the standpoint of high school football is a lot different from college football. So understanding the ins and outs of the defense first and foremost, and adapting to the change of speed. And like I said, we had Taylor, so he's a 4-year starter. So I didn't get a lot of reps in practice. So he really harped on, making the reps that we did get, make them be accounted for something. So don't just go down there and, do something that you're not wanting to do, but just go in there and make sure that those 2 or 3 reps that you do get that day, make them as perfect as possible. And so I think that first year was really big on learning the fundamentals of the position, whether that's footwork, arm angles, being disciplined on and off the field. I think he poured in a lot of knowledge that first year. And then the second year kind of changed from the standpoint of I became second string at that time. And so Taylor was still starting. I'm second string. So he starts demanding more because at any time of day, if Taylor goes down, I got to be ready to perform if that happens. So I think the roles change, and you start getting more reps in practice. He starts demanding more. He wants more from you. He sees potential, and he wants you to live up to that potential. So I think it's from the standpoint of just knowing your role. And like my first year, I knew I wasn't going to play. And so practices were a lot different. That second year, when I knew that if something was to happen to Taylor, I had to be ready to get in the game and go and win the game for the team. And so I think that changed, and I think his perception of me changed, and the way that he coached and led me was different than that first year of me being there.
Zac, with any college player or athlete in general, just when you're a young player not playing, maybe first year, were there any doubts of either that being the right spot for you or whatever it might have been? Because you don't know how it's all going to end up with all the success you end up having at school. Was there any moment where coach either had to help you either get through anything in particular that, I guess, that first couple years when you weren't playing as much? Was there anything like that you had to deal with at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think those talks were definitely valid. I mean, it's different. It's difficult when you come into a situation where you have a starter that's been there for a long time and is going to go down as one of the best quarterbacks to come through App. And so it's difficult because you come from being the big man on campus in high school, and then you come into college and you're not playing. Maybe you have some friends that are playing or getting some playing time, and you're not. So it's definitely difficult. And, you're not really second guessing who you are as an athlete, but you start really doubting if this is something that you can do. So I think he does a really good job of, making you realize that this is a process. It's not handed to you, so you have to work for it. And in my situation, obviously, they're not just going to hand the job over to someone that's been there for many, many years. And so I think he does a really good job of leaning in and making you realize, what's your role on this team. And when you come in, obviously, I had a role when I first got there. That was scout team. And I love doing scout team. But he forms it into a way that, okay, scout team, yeah, at this point in time, you feel like you might not be getting better, but you're also helping our defense. You're improving our team. And at the same time, you're improving your fundamentals. And so he takes a little different set, he makes it, you look at it from a different perspective. And I think that's really beneficial because players coming in, not getting to play can definitely put a lot of doubts in your mind. And then nowadays, you can transfer and whatnot. So I think he does a really good job of leaning in on what he knows and what the veterans know on that team and pouring in on the young people that need it. So none of those questions arise.
So that 2018 season, you guys go 11-2. You cracked the top 25 at one point, win a Sun Belt championship. You were part of 4 teams that did that during your time there. I didn't mention either, but you're part of 3-time all conference honors at times there. You guys win the Sun Belt. You win the New Orleans Bowl. That season, a lot of success there for you personally and the team. It starts off at Penn State. I know that you wish you had that one back to pull off that upset there, but what was that like for you? And essentially a season opener, how did coach kind of help you through that and enable you to feel as comfortable as possible in a difficult situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think he just, at that point in time, no one knew who I was, or obviously I didn't know. I mean, I knew who I was. I knew what kind of player I was, but obviously I didn't know how successful I was going to be. In my mind, I had already dreamed. I've always dreamed of this day. And so I was ready, very nervous. And so I think it was, I think as any coach, you're kind of nervous because, you come from a team that you've had a starter for 3 years. You didn't have to worry about none of these games. And you knew that guy was going to go in there and compete to the best of his ability. So, I think he was nervous from that standpoint. And I think he knew what type of player I was, but being my first game in a huge environment, I definitely think that left him with some question marks, which is very understandable. And so I think that game really set the tone for my career. I think first and foremost, I gained a lot of respect from him, but then I gained a lot of respect from our coaches. And I think from there, everything just started piggybacking and everything started falling in line to where I wanted it to be, but where Coach Ponce wanted it to be. So, practice was good leading up to that week. The week before that was probably the worst practice I've ever had, that week span of my whole career. I think I just had a lot of stuff going in my mind. Obviously, I'm about to play in front of 105,000 people. I've never started before. I'm still trying to learn the playbook. A lot of things going through my mind. But he set me down and really made me realize, settle down. It's just a game at the end of the day. Do what you're coached, and at the end of the day, you're going to succeed. So I think him just calming me down in that point in time, making me realize, that I was built for this stage and I can compete with anyone. And then obviously we go out there and, wish we could have that game back, but, we can't. So I think that right there kind of just set the stage for how my career was going to go.
As the seasons go, you touched on the playbook there. Can you maybe explain what the playbook was like? Did it have to change very much as you guys kind of, go from Taylor to yourself? Did anything have to change there? And just how did he kind of help you learn? I mean, it's all quarterbacks have to learn as a young player, learn a playbook and the whole thing. How did he kind of help in that process? And can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, playbook didn't change. I think from a standpoint of, running capabilities, me and Taylor were kind of on the same stage. And so playbook didn't change from that standpoint. So, we did a lot of drop back passes, quick game, read option, and play action passes. So none of that changed. And Ponce wasn't going to change that because that's what he lives and breathes by. And so that's why he was going to be the best he could be. And that was his offense. And so nothing changed from that perspective. But from learning a playbook, it definitely is difficult for myself. I'm more hands-on. I need to go in there. I need to be thrown in the fire. I need to learn from my mistakes so I won't make that mistake again. And I think he did a really good job of leaning on to the older guys. And we spent a lot of time outside of football, whether that was doing walkthroughs by ourselves or doing routes on air with receivers, getting timing down. So he made us do a lot of things outside of football to where when we came into the building, we would be prepared. So I think he, as a coach, really relies a lot on senior leadership, junior leadership, people that have played a lot of downs of football to really mentor the younger group, because he can sit here in front of you and tell you, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. This is what your read is. But when you're hearing it from a teammate that has gone through this situation, it's more reliable, and you can connect with that more. So I think as a coach, he really depends on the leadership to take over from that role. But also at the end of the day, you have to know what you're doing. So he's going to demand greatness from that standpoint. So we did a lot of quizzes, a lot of tests, making sure that you knew what was going on in that playbook and you knew what receivers were doing what on what play. So it's definitely hardcore when it comes to learning the playbook, because first and foremost, that is the most important.
I'm always curious about the freedom a quarterback gets in an offense, either audibling or changing, or even just having the open dialogue of discussion, either within a game or going into it. What was that like for you? And again, maybe that changed because again, he was only you were there. That was your first year starting, and then he moves on after that. But just what was that like for you? Did you have to, how was that process?
Definitely at the beginning, that I think that's something you have to do. I think that's trust that you have to gain, not only from the quarterback coach, but from the head coach to allow you to even have that capability. I think at the end of that year, I started having more say in some of the plays that I wanted. And so at the very beginning, that wasn't in sight. I definitely, at that point, you put a lot of trust in our coaches to make sure that, that they did their work from a standpoint of watching the film, making sure that we're prepared. But also our say doesn't really, you do have a say, but at the end of the day, they're going to go with their gut over our gut. And they've seen a lot more football. They've done this a lot longer than we have. And so they definitely lean in on that more. But I would say as the season progressed, obviously I started learning how to watch film better. I saw exactly what was going on, whether that was with defenses, alignment, or, safety blitzes, whatever was going on. I think I learned more about the game of football. And so my opinion was more relevant at that point in time than when I first started playing.
So all coaches have these things I like to call, non-negotiables. Look, if you, for example, if you want to play quarterback for Coach Ponce, you've got to do these things. What were some things for him that were essentially, strong keys, strong points of emphasis, essentially these non-negotiables for him to play for him? What did quarterbacks have to do? What did you have to do for him?
Well, I think as a quarterback, first and foremost, you got to be a leader. And I think not only a leader on the field, but off the field. So you have to be a good Samaritan outside of football. And he really relies on that heavy. Because if you're not reliable outside of football, you're not going to be reliable when the game comes on the line. So obviously, I think accountability is a huge thing that he really emphasizes on. He's very big into grades. He wants you to get your degree, and he wants to make sure that you're tracking the way you need to be tracking. And if you're not, then that's a conversation that you're going to be having with him. And so, he cares a lot about football, but he also cares about the development of young men. And I think that's most important. And I think that's why he is successful as he is, because he demands greatness off the field as much as he does on the field. And he pours into that and makes you realize that this degree can really set you up for life. Football is not forever, and he relays that message to you and makes it clear. And so I think that, and then just, everyday hard work, showing up on time, never being late to meetings, doing what you're saying that you're going to be doing. And then on the football field, making sure that you're making the right calls at the line, making sure that you're recognizing where the safety is, where the corner is, if it's a corner blitz, just making sure that football the way that you're supposed to be knowing football. So he holds you accountable and making sure that you know how to read the defense. If it's a play action pass, where's the safety at? Recognizing the defense. And so he demands a lot, but he also pours in a lot. And so it's a two-way street when it comes to that stuff. And so I think he does a really good job of that.
Like I said, you guys had that successful season, successful program, essentially. Just you're not obviously just showing up and playing. What were the game plans like? How prepared did you feel each and every week going into it from coach's standpoint, making sure you were ready to go, and the offense in general, that you guys were going to be as prepared as possible?
Yeah, I mean, we spent a ton of time watching film, and he graded us on everything to making sure that you were prepared. So we were always sprinting in practice. We were probably most prepared quarterbacks in the country from that standpoint. We were never allowed to walk from drill to drill. We were always prepared. You always had to show up on time. We always had to be the first one on the field. So he demands excellence, and he sets the bar for other groups to follow you. And so from a prepared standpoint, that was watching film. We had to do scouting reports. So every Sunday he'd give you a list of players. You'd have to find the good, the bad, the ugly on these players, and you'd have to figure out where they're from, what's their career stats, all these kind of things, making sure that you realize who is on this defense and who is going to be playing. And then, from a game plan standpoint, we talk about first downs, second downs, third downs, red zones. So just making sure you're prepared. So when you're in the game, as something's thrown at you, you know how to respond to that adversity. And so he does a really good job of preparing you, setting you up for success. So at the end of the day, you don't look like an idiot when you're in there playing.
Zac, I said it from the beginning, man, I appreciate you taking the time to do this and kind of go through a little bit of your journey. And you went on to have success after that. Like I said, nearly 7,000 passing yards, top 5 in school history, 1,300 rushing, accounting for nearly 90 touchdowns. I mean, it was just really impressive. I'm sure a lot of App State fans still remember you, and I really enjoyed watching you play. It was great talking to you. So I'll let you get going. Appreciate your insight here into coach, and definitely, hopefully things stay well for you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you.